Paul Dance, thanks so much for joining me on Upfront.
Mark, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. In 2022, the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, called on you to assemble a wide range of conservatives to create this thing called Project 2025. The project obviously drew significant attention, especially during last year's presidential campaign. People use the word, but I'm not sure they always know what it is. What exactly is Project 2025?
Sure, and I can even back up a little bit. I am a lawyer by training, always in private practice, so I'm not a politician. But what had happened was I was always very much a admirer of Donald Trump and his work, and my family's from New York City initially, so they saw Trump and really take back the city and build it to greatness again. I served in the first Trump administration, and I saw how difficult it is for an outsider to come into government. So when I joined Project 2025, we had left power and the conservatives were disarrayed. And the hope there was to really take this moment and retool, to bring people together to kind of get on one page. And that's what Heritage had done. Heritage is a think tank, so they provide advice to people in government.
Yeah.
And this was a real ability to reach across various parts of the conservative spirit and build something that would enable the next conservative president, when he or she went into office, to have a kind of an assembled group of people who now better understood how to work in government and had some alignment.
A major area of alignment between Trump and Project 2025 is the overhaul of the federal government, which of course was spearheaded by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. You have previously criticized unelected bureaucrats, elites, and quote, big tech oligarchs. But you've praised Elon Musk, and you said that he was sort of key to implementing this part of Project 2025. Do you stand by your support of Musk?
The central premise here, and I do, of course, the central premise of Project 2025 was deconstruct the administrative state. And to back up, the notion here for you viewers around the world is that we have a government built on three branches, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And what had happened in the last 100 years was this fourth illicit branch, kind of called the administrative state, has sprung up, and it had taken powers from these other three. And that was populated.
I've heard you talk about it, sort of almost like it's an anti-democratic thing. People didn't vote for these people.
Exactly.
They're doing what they want to do without support. No one voted for Elon Musk, though.
Well, they absolutely did, in the sense that he got behind President Trump. He went out and stood on stage in the rallies, and he was very public in his support.
But that's not the same as voting for somebody.
Well, certainly.
And the Department of Government Efficiency isn't an act. It's not like the Department of Education or the Department of Defense, right? I mean,
he's a consultant to the president. He's an advisor to the president. So ultimately, he was not empowered, but to make the decisions, the cabinet secretaries are those who are confirmed.
Yeah.
But look, most of the staff the president has is advisory in nature.
I see. So, but if you're against big tech oligarchs, who, if not Elon Musk, would qualify as a big tech oligarch?
Well, big tech oligarchs, like everybody else, have a chance to come home and like correct their ways
and stop being big tech oligarchs.
Well, they are. Many of these oligarchs are extremely talented people, in the main, but the system, I believe, over time has allowed them to accrete too much wealth. It's very important.
How much wealth does Elon Musk have, though?
Well, I'm saying we probably have some common ground on this, but to be clear, these folks make the pie larger for all of us.
But that's a different issue. You specifically have an issue with unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah.
And this guy was unelected and ran a government office that was created. That's bureaucracy. You're against elites. He's the richest person in the world and a big tech oligarch. He's amassing power and he owns X. Tesla, would you at least acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you're making an exception for Elon Musk? That this guy, he clearly satisfies the conditions for all the things you were criticizing before.
What's critical about Elon Musk is that he's focused his resources almost in a selfless manner. And certainly he's extremely wealthy now. He was extremely wealthy
is rough.
But no, it's reportedly gave up a quarter of his net worth. Now he's extraordinary net worth. It makes no difference. But he took his time away from his personal pursuits and volunteered for the government and did this. And that's kind of the promise of Project 2025, that there are talented people all over the country that need to kind of put down and their tools and their careers and come and serve in public life and make this government better. So
Project 2025 proposes creating barriers to social programs, including healthcare, food assistance, and housing, while completely eliminating low-income early childhood education programs. I'm thinking specifically of like Head Start. Also giving tax breaks to wealthy households. How do you make sense of these measures in light of this argument made by Project 2025 advocates like yourself that this is going to help everyday working class Americans?
Well, I don't agree with the characterization about barriers. I know, look, my family came from nothing. My dad grew up in a housing project 2 miles from here in the Alfred E. Smith. So when I was a senior at MIT, I moved my family's belongings out of the housing project. The reality is that we have a social net in this government that was conceived to help the neediest and lift them up. But over time, that's been turned into, it's exaggerated and been used by a set of people to kind of make a permanent underclass.
So one of the proposals is to cut food assistance, but specifically to reform the SNAP program to add a new set of requirements around work. Is that fair? Is that accurate?
Well, it's many things. One is, like, if you look at the nature of our food, and I think this is where Bobby Kennedy, and this is part of the whole movement, it's not the healthiest food in the world. We need to be a much healthier country, and that's the promise of MAHA. So it's in large measure making sure what we're subsidizing is better for us to even eat in the first place. But two, the work requirements are fair. We want to make sure that people are engaged.
So before you could just get the access, and now there's something in front of it, a work requirement that stops you from getting it directly.
I believe that was in existence. There's various forms of work requirements.
No, that's not true. This was re-implementing the requirement. It had existed once before under a previous administration. It was gone. Now they're adding this thing that you have to do before you access the stuff. It's called a barrier. How does getting rid of price controls on prescription drugs encourage people to work hard and make their lives easier?
The price control, our big pharma thing is so broken. Most of the commercials you see today are being paid for by big pharma. Those are ultimately being paid for by you, the consumer, when you go and buy those drugs. The nature of it is that the entire thing needs to be retooled.
No, but that's not what was done. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the Inflation Reduction Act, which created a drug price negotiation program in Medicare. Basically, the government established price controls for prescription drugs so people wouldn't have to pay too much for drugs. That's been repealed. That means that there are no price controls. That means the drugs prices can go up without any controls. How does that help working class or middle class people?
Well, I'm not sure that's the case. And certainly Trump has done a lot with bringing down drug prices, insulin prices. And, part of the funny thing about being Project 2025 is I'm getting quizzed on a 900-page book.
No, I'm just pulling an example you gave.
He did this in the first term. We can back up and point out the various successes. But believe me, he's going about reconstructing this whole system. It's not going to happen overnight.
Okay.
But, that he's been clear that this is not an attack on entitlements, and the left has framed this as taking things away.
But I've just given two examples. I've just given two examples. Reforming the SNAP program. We've talked about the drug prices. Getting rid of the Head Start program. How is it getting rid of the Head Start program help anybody?
Well, again, with the SNAP, the other thing to realize is that when you have 20 million kind of undocumented people march into the country, you're gonna overload a lot of these social provisions, and that makes it much harder to even administrate in the first place.
No, but I mean, literally, food stamp benefits went up, and now they're being repealed. They're dropping down, so people literally will have less money for food.
Well, the amount of food, the point was that they were giving these food stamps away to illegal aliens coming in and basically offering people free food, free everything, free phones, free credit cards, and that was almost an entire entreaty for people to cross the border. And it's unfair to the Americans who are being pushed out in a way that there still is a group of people trying to make their way up the ladder and now are being crushed by this recent onslaught of people.
Do you think they're being crushed by having Head Start cut, by having their food stamp benefits cut, by having their health care benefits go down, by having their pharmacy prices go up?
I think with the Head Start, the notion is to push education down to the states. If states want to provide that, they can. But the reality is that the education system is broken. And I say this as someone who went from K through 12 in the public school systems. But we are getting a failing grade when it comes to just simple arithmetic and reading and writing.
You know, the data shows that Head Start makes you more likely to do well in reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Well, if that's the case, the state governors who are in favor of it should be able to implement it using state resources.
More than 180 court rulings have at least temporarily paused Trump's orders. Some federal judges have ruled that his actions, from mass firings to attacks on law firms, are unlawful and unconstitutional. You are a lawyer, so I'm going to appeal to your expertise here. Do you feel like Trump is upholding the rule of law?
Very much so. You know, like I'm saying, this is the battle is joined now between kind of various schools of thought with respect to the Constitution. And what's happening now is that an activist judiciary is kind of imposing its will in what are in the main executive branch decisions. Now, the branches were always supposed to provide checks and balances, but they weren't meant to usurp. So, you know, this is going to be the natural response of the left to kind of to block Trump through orders, but these orders are also getting overturned in many cases. I think, unfortunately.
Wait, hold on. But the orders against Trump that are being struck down by courts, you're saying are reasonable and lawful, but the ones that are striking down Trump's executive orders are activist?
The executive orders are basically policy directives, and you know, to even enjoin a executive order is almost, it's not judicially ripe. It's kind of like attacking him.
But doesn't it
making
depend on the
policy
order?
in a statement. It depends on the order, sure.
Under what justification could Trump reasonably crack down on universities? Particularly, I'm thinking about the Harvard example,
Sure.
Where he revoked Harvard's ability to enroll international students.
Well, you have to understand, a lot of these universities, they get their basic subsistence from the federal government in terms of billions of dollars of research. But those grants are not done on good terms. They help themselves to like 65, 80% that go to generalized overhead. So the American taxpayer is subsidizing these universities for this single amount of research. It's if a private, for example, a Bill Gates Foundation commissioned the same research, they generally attribute maybe 20 or 15% to overhead. So the federal government for years has been getting a raw deal with these grants. But
What does that have to do with Harvard cutting international students?
Because, you know, here's the problem, that these, like I say, much of these universities, and I went to MIT, okay, I get undergraduate and graduate work there. The problem is that they were built off the backs of the American taxpayer. Some of them were for the military-industrial complex, which is fine. That's the basis. But they should be also, you know, perpetuating American citizens. Like, look, people bemoan the fact that there are more people of color in STEM. Well, they're getting crowded out by foreign research assistants, you know, and that's what's happened in a lot of cases.
So you're saying that
Yeah.
the reason Trump is not allowing international students into Harvard is so that he can produce more domestic black and brown scholars? This has nothing to do with retaliation for the free speech debates that have been happening for months. This has nothing to do with the Israel-Palestine protests that have been going on campus. This has nothing to do with Harvard publicly saying we're not going to succumb to the president's demands. You're saying all that is completely unrelated and coincidental, that he's cut Harvard's ability to get students right after that happened?
Here's the problem with these big universities. They're so lopsided, they don't even have someone who thinks like MAGA or America First, that they would run out of the academia, and they have no breaks. They maybe have people who maybe are Bush light or have some sort of, you know, affinity to more traditional forms of republicanism, but the people who think like I do have not pursued careers in academia because they're shut out, they're run out, and the stories are manifold. And that
again, I don't see the connection between that and cutting Harvard's ability to bring
because
in
those you know, they would have stopped long ago. Like at my alma mater, MIT. What happened after October 7th was a disgraceful anti-Semitic attack to basically block Jewish students from entering the school door. And it's called the Infinite Corridor. But the president, herself Jewish, basically allowed the students to take it over and do these vile anti-Semitic things. That was done with no reproach. The board actually backed her up. And it's because there's no one right-headed there who says, this is an outrage. We're going backwards here.
So then the president has a right, based on that argument, and I disagree with much of what you said, but based on that logic, if the president feels like the university isn't properly represented ideologically, that there's not the right ideological distribution, he has a right to stop certain kinds of students to come in, to create space for new kinds of students to come in?
Well, in these cases, he's not doing it. He's cutting the grant. The grant, one of the conditions says you will abide by federal law. If the federal law is grants from the Department of Ed that are basically saying you have to not violate people's constitutional rights, and you're there doing bigoted things against a religious student, being able to pursue his or her studies.
What bigoted things happened at Harvard?
MIT?
At Harvard. Because we're talking about Harvard.
I think there's videos of all kinds of Jewish people being forced to be fleeing the yard and basically harangued, and we could probably go back and find that. But sure, there's.
We probably couldn't, but again, just to be clear.
No, I think we could. Absolutely think we could.
But I think again the point here, just before we move on, is Harvard pushed back against the president's demands, and he immediately cut their funding or their ability to bring in students. And now you're adding a layer of issues and possibilities and hypotheticals and theories that even the president hasn't argued. I think it might be reasonable to say that the president is doing something retaliatory here. But we could probably agree to disagree.
I'll disagree.
One of the things that I've noticed about you throughout your career is that you are a fierce defender and advocate for free speech. But the Trump administration has arrested and detained international students and legal permanent U.S. residents for their pro-Palestinian speech. Should free speech protections apply to college students who criticize the Israeli government and U.S. foreign policy?
Well, look, certainly I'm a free speech advocate. The question is, can somebody who's an invitee of the United States, who's coming over on a student visa, and there's laws.
The Trump administration has arrested and detained international students as well as legal permanent U.S. residents.
Okay, well, let's take the first class of people. Those laws that give the people the right for the student visas are conditioned on kind of their good behavior and not instigating against the government.
Criticizing Israel bad behavior?
To the extent that they are forcing universities to violate the civil rights of students, it certainly is. And that's the case with the Jewish students.
If saying Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, is that bad behavior?
That's not what they're criticizing.
I'm asking, would that be
if you're trying to interact in a college campus and disrupt the normal studies of students there who are there on federal student loans, who are there
so like an encampment?
Yeah, an encampment, absolutely. If
you're part of an encampment,
to the extent that that encampment is on student property that has outside the university, perhaps they can do that. But look, again, we are in favor of peaceful protest. But that was not peaceful protest at the universities.
Everyone who's been arrested was wrong.
Look,
everyone who was arrested was an unpeaceful protest.
They shut down the ability for people to take final exams. Like, they didn't even get their final exam for the whole semester done because the universities couldn't even function. And you think about the millions of dollars.
So that's what you consider as non-peaceful?
Absolutely, that's
so
non-peaceful.
Martin Luther King blocking a bridge, then stopping people from being able to drive, that's also non-peaceful then?
He was doing it in a non-violent way, and it was not
What is the difference
harassing.
between blocking a walkway on a campus and blocking a bridge? What's the difference?
Here's the problem.
No, what's the difference? Please answer that.
Yeah, because doing it in a peaceful manner, as Martin Luther King did.
If you're just sitting there blocking a walkway, or you're just sitting in a building chanting, stopping normal business from happening, but not committing any acts of violence, are you okay with that?
That wasn't the case.
But that's exactly what civil disobedience is my point. When you boycott a bridge, like the famous Pettus Bridge that Martin Luther King blocked, it was stopping people from being able to drive.
I think
you just happen to agree with his values. You don't agree with these other ones. But that's the problem.
Because he was fundamentally American values. These are foreigners coming over and staging protests in the United States against United States foreign policy. And it's a different animal.
And here's
It's
the
not-
problem. Many of those protesters are American. Many of those protesters are even Jewish. Many of them are just on a different side of the issue than you. And we can't, some would argue, pick and choose whose free speech we protect based on whether we think their values are sufficiently American or not. But I want to get to something you said early in our conversation. You talked about family values and traditional values. Another central objective in Project 2025 is restoring family values and using the federal government to enforce certain ideas, Christian ideas, frankly, about the nuclear family, about marriage, about gender, and about reproductive rights. What authority does the government have to impose biblical ideas about morality in public life?
That's, the importance of the family is that you have a investment in the future, and that's what it is. We as a population, there's a big depopulation push across the world that believes that the globe is overpopulated. The realities of Western civilizations.
What about the biblical part? I want to focus on the biblical
Yeah.
part. What authority does the government have to impose biblical ideas?
Well, I don't think it's imposing biblical ideas, but promotion of
Okay,
the family
fair enough.
is
Let
not
me read something
promoting-
to you then.
Yeah.
Project 2025, page 481. Protect faith-based grant recipients from religious liberty violations and maintain a biblically based social science reinforced definition of marriage. Biblically based.
Here's the thing. They're talking about promoting mother and father and having kids.
Based on what text?
That's based on about 10,000 years of human civilization.
Yeah, but it didn't say based on the Gilgamesh epics. It didn't say based on the Enuma Elish tablets. It said based on the Bible. And you're telling me that it's not biblically based when it literally says word for word, maintain a biblically based definition of marriage and family.
It's talking, the first part of that is talking about stopping the federal government from basically penalizing, in particular, Christians and Jews who are pursuing these things. As you know, there's
We
all
agree on
kinds
that
of
part.
cases.
That's why I'm focusing on this
Yeah.
other part, which is what authority does the government have to maintain I need you to at least be honest with me. Can you acknowledge that Project 2025 does want to impose a biblical vision of this?
Look, the country is based on Judeo-Christian values. Those are value systems. It's
Biblical
not,
values. That's the Bible, right?
That's Judeo-Christian values built the
Old Testament,
Constitution.
New Testament, Bible.
It informed it in large measure. This is why the United States stands in the first place.
On what authority does the government make that call?
Look, you walk around at the various government buildings, this entirety of this American experiment was built on those value system. And that's basically a lot of the Enlightenment that went on to say, no, you don't have to subscribe to them, but these are the enlightened values, the freedom of speech, the freedom to pursue religion. That's what brought these people to America in the first place. And so, look, you got to have a value system. And if you knock that Bible and that Judeo-Christian belief system out of the way, what is the value system you're replacing with? Neo-Marxism? Like, where is this complete secularism?
What if somebody said I
Like,
want it to be based on the Quran?
on the Quran, that's obviously a belief system, but that's not what was historically the basis of the United
No,
States.
but what I'm saying is, what if the next president is Muslim and the majority of people, Americans, vote for him? Would you be okay then with the election and the democracy being the deciding factor on what kind of values we impose?
It's being done in a democratic fashion. That's probably the right result. But
Isn't
the
that
point
scary
is,
though? We could end up in a theocracy, no?
look, the Judeo-Christian belief system gave rise to these enlightened views of the United States Constitution, a rule of law, of God-given rights, of kind of a separation of powers, of an ability.
Don't forget slavery.
Well, look, there's a lot of historical wrongs that have been corrected by this country over its 250 years. This is the greatest engine of freedom across the world, promotion of freedom, and a beacon for it. So yes, there's been stumbles and missteps and black marks, real like black eyes in this whole thing. But the society has moved forward and there's been great advancement. So I think as a model, there's nothing like it.
Are you okay having the Ten Commandments in every classroom?
To the extent that they inform a lot of the value system, it should not be taken away from it. Certainly, if there's others, they can have it alongside it. But
But
you
do you
can't
think the Ten
just.
Commandments should be in the classroom?
They have every right to put it in the classroom.
But I'm asking a different question now.
Yeah.
Do you think they should be? I'm asking a values question.
I think it's up to the local, like we want schools to be local. We want parents to be involved. But to the extent that it's excluded, that's wrong. But if the parents in the local schools just want to put it in, yeah, sure.
I heard you say, I'm going to read this. You said, I myself am not an expert on education. The fact that public schools can't be great for my kids really upsets us, that we have to deprogram our kids after school. You said from eating bugs or whatever nonsense are being piped in, and these are grade schools. You're complaining about how even at the earliest grades, your kids get programmed, and you have to deprogram them when they leave. You don't want that to happen. And yet you're okay with kids who may or may not be Christian, just as an example, having the 10 Commandments on the wall. Can you see how that might be a contradiction to some?
Well, no, I mean, the first is the 10 Commandments. That gives you the historical creation of this United States. That certainly
no, it gives you a set of directives. Thou shalt not. It's literally don't do this.
Yeah, well, it also informs a lot of the federal law, of the state law, of the criminal code. It's another code that was handed down, like
it's an imposition of values. Yeah, but
it's a value system. It's Magna Carta. It's the Bible. Whatever.
Is school supposed to do that? I guess is my question.
Absolutely, schools can put that value system.
So, how should the government deal with, or how should schools deal with the way that race and gender is taught in schools? Should we teach racism? That racism exists?
The idea that there's a structural racism is very invidious. That it's really one of these DEI programs, almost a neo-Marxist philosophy.
How's that a neo-Marxist philosophy?
Well, it's basically telling you that it's trying to undo the fabric of the country in the sense that lay blame against people.
Gotcha. That's not what neo-Marxism is, but we can have that conversation differently. That's not what neo-Marxism is. But do you think that conversations about gender and gender identity, for example, being trans or being gender nonconforming or being non-binary, do you think there's space for that inside of school?
Not in the kindergarten, not in the first grade,
when?
Not in the fifth grade. Like this is where it's everywhere. It's pervasive.
What grade would it be appropriate?
It's pervasive.
What
everywhere.
grade would it be appropriate?
You know, maybe when people sign up in senior year, if at a certain point, like you need.
So what do you do for the kid in third grade who's trans?
The trans thing, that's a whole nother operation.
But that's what I'm asking about.
I don't believe that kids are trans in third grade.
When do people become trans?
They become trans when their parents are forcing them to become trans.
So you don't believe anybody is trans?
I believe that, that, look, it's not biological, it's not science related,
well, no, gender is all social, but my question is, do you believe anyone is legitimately trans?
Look, I believe in XY chromosomes and XX chromosomes.
Right, which are markers of sex, but now we're talking gender. My question is, do you believe, yes or no, that anyone is legitimately trans?
They're in their mind, they may be doing that, but that's not for
Do you believe it's a mental disorder?
It's not a physical disorder, and to put all these chemicals in your body in the hopes of changing you physiologically is wrong-headed.
Last question for you. Are kids allowed to read about slavery in your mind?
Absolutely, and they do. That's like, I think the problem is that there's legitimate arguments that we can have, but like to always kind of mash the two together, I think it's a disservice. And it's unfortunate, like I would say in defense, maybe we can leave on a good note, conservatives get to where they are because they want better for their kids. And it's looking for a better world. Like you have to be.
Do you find other groups don't want better for their kids?
I think other groups, some people don't have kids. They don't have a view of the future other than themselves. And what I think that.
No, you say conservatives want better for their kids. Do non-conservatives want better for their kids?
Some cases I'm saying that they may, and they do want better for their kids. That's why I'm trying to find a common ground here. But like that you realize that there's life beyond you or yourself, and that's what propels a lot of us to work for a better world. And
fair enough. I think there might be different ideas. There's always different ideas about what better looks like and what that end product for the world looks like. But that's why we have conversations like this. Paul, I want to thank you so much for joining me on Upfront. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark.